What happens when a cop stops a black man and treats him like he's nothing, only to find out he's a diplomat with immunity? You're not going to believe how this ends. Hey, it's your guy here, and today I've got a story that'll make you mad and cheer all at once. We're talking about a black man who's just walking down the street, minding his own business, when a cop decides to mess with him. But this isn't just any guy, he's a big-time diplomat, and things are about to get crazy. Let's jump right in. It's a chilly evening in Washington, D.C., and the city's got that quiet, important vibe it always has after the workday ends. The streets are lined with old brick buildings and fancy government offices, their flags waving in the breeze. Streetlights cast a warm golden glow on the sidewalks, and you can hear the distant hum of traffic mixed with the occasional honk of a car horn. People are bundled up in coats and scarves, heading home or grabbing dinner at one of the cozy restaurants nearby. The air smells like a mix of fallen leaves and roasted chestnuts from a street vendor a block away. In this busy scene, a man named Kofi Mensah is walking down 16th Street, heading toward his hotel after a long day of meetings. Kofi's 42 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with a calm, confident way about him. He's wearing a dark overcoat over a tailored suit, his tie a deep red that stands out against his crisp white shirt. His shoes are polished, clicking softly against the pavement with each step, and he's carrying a sleek leather briefcase in one hand. Kofi's not just any guy. He's the ambassador of a small West African country here in D.C. for a series of diplomatic talks with U.S. officials. He's been in the role for 3 years, traveling the world, speaking up for his nation, and making sure its voice is heard on the global stage. Kofi's got a lot on his mind tonight. He's been negotiating trade agreements all day, sitting in stuffy conference rooms with men in suits who talk too much and listen too little. He's tired, but he's proud of the progress he made, securing better export terms for his country's cocoa farmers, a big win for the people back home. All he wants now is to get back to his hotel, order some room service, and call his wife and kids to tell them about his day. His hotel's just a few blocks away, and he's enjoying the walk, the cool air clearing his head as he thinks about the warm meal waiting for him. But as Kofi crosses a quiet intersection, a police car pulls up beside him, its lights flashing red and blue in the dusk. The car's tires crunch against the pavement as it stops, and a single officer steps out, a guy named Officer Bennett. Bennett's in his late 30s, with a square jaw, short brown hair, and a look in his eyes that says he's already made up his mind about Kofi. He's wearing the standard DC police uniform, dark blue with a badge that glints under the streetlights, and his hand rests on his belt, close to his holster. "Hey you," Bennett calls out, his voice sharp, cutting through the evening air. "Where you headed?" Kofi stops walking, turning to face the officer with a polite but firm expression. "I'm heading to my hotel," he says, his voice calm, his accent carrying the soft rhythm of his native language. "It's just up the street. Is there a problem, officer?" Bennett steps closer, his eyes narrowing as he looks Kofi up and down. He takes in the suit, the briefcase, the way Kofi carries himself, but none of it seems to matter. "Hotel, huh?" Bennett says, his tone heavy with doubt. "What's a guy like you doing walking around here at this hour?" "Let's see some." Kofi feels a familiar tightness in his chest, the kind he's felt too many times before. He's traveled to dozens of countries, sat across from world leaders, but no matter where he goes, moments like this still happen. A black man in a suit, walking in a nice part of town, and suddenly he's a suspect. "I'm on my way back from a meeting," Kofi says, keeping his voice steady. "I have my diplomatic ID in my briefcase. I can show you if you like." Bennett's lip curls into a smirk, like Kofi just told a bad joke. "Diplomatic ID?" he says, letting out a short laugh. "Yeah, right. I've heard that one before. Turn around, hands behind your back. I'm taking you in for questioning." Kofi's heart sinks, but he doesn't let it show. "Officer, I'm an ambassador," he says, his voice firm but still calm. "I have diplomatic immunity. You don't have the authority to detain me." Bennett's smirk fades, replaced by a flash of anger. "I don't care who you say you are," he snaps, pulling out his handcuffs. "You're in my city, and I say you're coming with me. Now turn around or I'll make this harder for you." Kofi stands there, his mind racing. He knows he could push back. He has every right to. But he also knows how these situations can escalate, especially for a black man, even one with his status. He thinks about his kids, his wife, the headlines back home if this goes wrong. So he takes a deep breath, places his briefcase on the ground, and slowly turns around, letting Bennett cuff him. The cold metal bites into his wrists, and he feels a wave of frustration, but he keeps his head high, refusing to let this officer see him break. Bennett leads Kofi to the patrol car, shoving him a little harder than necessary as he opens the back door. Kofi ducks his head to get in, the leather seat creaking under him as he sits, his hands still cuffed behind his back. The car smells like stale coffee and cleaning solution, and the plastic partition between the front and back seats is scratched and smudged. Bennett slams the door, gets in the driver's seat, and radios into the station. "Got a guy on 16th Street, he says into the mic, his voice smug. "No ID, acting suspicious. Bringing him in." Kofi sits quietly, his eyes fixed on the back of Bennett's head. He's angry, sure, but he's also calculating. He knows his rights. Diplomatic immunity means Bennett can't legally hold him, but he also knows that explaining that to a cop like this won't do much good right now. He thinks about his first day as an ambassador, when his mentor, a seasoned diplomat, sat him down and said, "Kofi, you're going to represent our country, but you're also going to face people who see you as less because of your skin. Don't let them dim your light." That advice has carried him through tough moments before, and it's carrying him now. They arrive at the station, a squat brick building with a flickering neon sign out front. Inside, the place is buzzing with late-night activity, phones ringing, officers typing reports, a drunk guy yelling in the corner as he's booked. Bennett leads Kofi to a small holding room, a gray box with a metal table, 2 chairs, and a one-way mirror on the wall. He uncuffs Kofi but keeps the door locked, tossing a notepad on the table. "Sit," Bennett says, his tone sharp. "You're going to tell me who you really are, or you're staying here all night." Kofi sits, his posture straight, his hands resting on the table. "I've already told you," he says, his voice steady. "I'm Kofi Mensah, ambassador of my country. I have diplomatic immunity. You need to let me go." Bennett leans against the wall, crossing his arms, his smirk back in full force. "You keep saying that," he says, "but I don't buy it. An ambassador walking around D.C. with no security? No fancy car? Come on, man. You think I'm stupid? You're probably some con artist trying to pull a fast one." Kofi's jaw tightens, but he doesn't raise his voice. "I don't need to prove myself to you," he says, "but if you don't release me soon, this is going to become a much bigger problem. For you and your department." Bennett laughs, a harsh sound that bounces off the walls. "A problem for me?" he says. "Buddy, you're the one in cuffs. Keep talking like that, and I'll add resisting arrest to your charges." He turns to leave the room, tossing one last jab over his shoulder. "Sit tight. Maybe a few hours in here will loosen you up." As the door slams shut, Kofi lets out a slow breath, his hands clenching into fists for a moment before he forces them to relax. He's been in tough spots before, negotiating with hostile governments, navigating tense trade disputes. But this feels different. This isn't about politics or policy. This is about who he is, about the way Bennett looked at him and decided he didn't belong. He thinks about his kids again, his daughter who wants to be a diplomat like him, his son who loves soccer and dreams of playing professionally. What kind of world are they growing up in, where a man can be treated like this just for walking down the street? While Kofi sits in the holding room, things are starting to move outside. One of the officers at the front desk, a younger guy named Officer Patel, overheard Bennett's radio call and got curious. Patel's been on the force for just 2 years, and he's got a knack for noticing things others miss. He pulls up the precinct's database and starts searching for Kofi Mensah, cross-referencing with international records. It doesn't take long for a hit to come up, a diplomatic file from the State Department, listing Kofi as an ambassador with full immunity. Patel's eyes widen, and he grabs his phone, dialing his sergeant. "Sarge, we've got a problem," he says, his voice urgent. "The guy Bennett brought in, he's a diplomat." Back in the holding room, Kofi's waiting, his mind still sharp despite the late hour. He knows it's only a matter of time before someone figures out who he is. His embassy will notice he's missing soon, and they'll start making calls. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, The door swings open, and a new face walks in. Sergeant Lopez, a stocky woman with a serious expression and a badge that says she's been on the force for 15 years. Bennett's behind her, looking less cocky now, his face pale as he realizes something's wrong. "Mr. Mensah," Lopez says, her tone respectful but firm. "I'm Sergeant Lopez. We've confirmed your identity with the State Department. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. You're free to go." Kofi stands, smoothing his coat, his expression unreadable. "A misunderstanding?" he repeats, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was prejudice. Your officer targeted me because of the color of my skin. I want a formal apology from him." Lopez nods, her lips tight, and turns to Bennett. "You heard him," she says. "Apologize, now." Bennett's face flushes red, but he knows he's out of options. I'm sorry," he mumbles, his eyes on the floor, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know who you were." Kofi looks at him for a long moment, his gaze steady. "That's the problem," he says. "You didn't care to find out. You saw a black man and made up your mind. That's not a mistake, it's a choice." Lopez escorts Kofi out of the holding room, handing him his briefcase with a quiet apology. As they walk through the precinct, the other officers avoid eye contact, some of them whispering to each other, others pretending to be busy with paperwork. Kofi keeps his head high, his steps measured, his dignity intact despite everything. Outside, a black SUV from his embassy is waiting, its driver, a young man named Samuel, jumping out to open the door. "Mr. Ambassador," Samuel says, his voice full of relief. "We were so worried." Kofi nods, giving Samuel a small smile. "I'm fine," he says, though there's a weight in his voice that wasn't there before. "Let's get back to the hotel. I need to make some calls." As the SUV pulls away, Lopez turns to Bennett, her expression hard. "You're on desk duty until we sort this out," she says, "and you're lucky he's not pressing charges. Yet. Don't mess this up any more than you already have." Bennett doesn't respond, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the ground. He knows he's in deep trouble, and not just with his sergeant. Word of Kofi's arrest is already spreading. Patel, the officer who found Kofi's file, quietly tipped off a friend at a local news station, and by morning, the story will be everywhere. Sure enough, the next day, Kofi's arrest makes international headlines. News outlets run stories with titles like, "DC Cop Detains African Ambassador, a Diplomatic Incident," and "Racial Profiling Sparks Outrage in U.S. Capitol." Kofi's embassy releases a statement condemning the incident, demanding a full investigation, and the State Department scrambles to smooth things over, issuing a public apology to Kofi and his government. Protests erupt outside the precinct, with activists chanting for justice, holding signs that say, "Respect Black lives and end profiling now." The story goes viral on social media, with hashtags like #Justice for Kofi trending worldwide. Kofi, meanwhile, is back at his hotel, sitting in a plush armchair in his suite, a cup of tea in his hands as he watches the news on a flat-screen TV. His phone buzzes with messages from his president, his foreign minister, his family, all wanting to know if he's okay. He takes a sip of his tea, the warmth soothing his nerves, and thinks about what comes next. He knows this incident isn't just about him. It's about every Black person who's ever been stopped, questioned, or treated like they don't belong. He decides to use his platform to speak out, scheduling a press conference for the next day to share his story and call for change. At the press conference, Kofi stands at a podium in front of a crowd of reporters, his suit pressed, his red tie bright against his shirt. Cameras flash as he speaks, his voice steady and powerful. "What happened to me is not an isolated incident," he says, his eyes scanning the room. "It's a symptom of a larger problem, a problem of prejudice, of profiling, of assuming guilt based on the color of someone's skin. I'm an ambassador and I was treated this way. What does that mean for those who don't have my status, my voice? We must do better." The room erupts in applause and Kofi's words echo across the globe. Back in DC, the police department announces new training programs focusing on cultural sensitivity and anti-bias practices. Bennett is officially suspended, pending a full investigation, and Lopez takes over his beat, determined to set a better example. The incident sparks a broader conversation about race and policing, not just in the US, but in Kofi's home country and beyond, where leaders start discussing how to protect their citizens abroad. Kofi returns to his diplomatic work, but he carries the incident with him, a reminder of why he does what he does. He video calls his kids that night, their faces lighting up the screen as they tell him about their day at school. "I'm proud of you, Daddy," his daughter says, her smile wide. "You're like a superhero." Kofi laughs, the sound warm and genuine, and for the first time in days, he feels a little lighter. This story shows us that respect isn't just about titles or immunity, it's about seeing people for who they are, not what you assume them to be. Kofi Mensah didn't just walk away from that precinct. He walked away with his head high, his voice heard, and a fire in his heart to keep fighting for justice, for himself, and for everyone else who's ever been made to feel small. If this story got you fired up, hit that subscribe button for more like it.